Welcome, explorer of ancient mysteries. In this episode, we venture deeper into the world of Sumer to unravel the legends, stories, and secrets of the Sumerian gods, especially the enigmatic Anunnaki. These powerful figures shaped not only the beliefs of a civilization, but also left a mark that echoes through history, mythology, and even today's curiosity about our origins. Imagine a world where every natural force, every aspect of life, and every city was embodied by a divine being. The Sumerians viewed their gods as both protectors and judges, bestowers of knowledge, and, at times, bringers of chaos. At the heart of this vast pantheon stood the Anunnaki, a group of gods whose roles, stories, and mysteries are as old as history itself. To understand the Anunnaki, we must first step into the sacred temples and ziggurats of Sumer. These monumental structures were more than just buildings. They were believed to be the earthly homes of the gods. Priests would ascend their many steps to perform complex rituals, offer sacrifices, and seek guidance from the divine. The air was thick with incense. The sound of hymns echoed through the halls, and the people looked to the gods for everything: rain for their crops, safety in war, health in times of plague, and wisdom for daily life. The word Anunnaki itself means those who came from the heavens, or princely offspring. In Sumerian mythology, the Anunnaki were the descendants of Un, the sky god, and Ki, the earth goddess. They were the great assembly, the council of gods who met to decide the fate of both mortals and lesser deities. Their numbers and identities could change from city to city and over time, but their presence was always central to Sumer's understanding of the cosmos. Among the most important Anunnaki were gods like Enlil, the lord of wind and air, who is often seen as the chief of the gods and the enforcer of divine order. There was Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh water, a trickster and benefactor of humanity who taught people arts and crafts, magic and science. Ninhursag, the mother goddess, was associated with fertility and the creation of life. Inanna, the goddess of love, war, and the planet Venus, was revered for her beauty, strength, and unpredictable nature. Each city-state in Sumer had its own patron deity, and the myths often reflected the rivalries and alliances between these cities. The stories of the gods were also stories of the people, their struggles, hopes, and triumphs. Myths explain the changing seasons, the rise and fall of cities, and the unpredictable floods of the rivers. The Anunnaki were at the center of it all, acting as creators, destroyers, and judges. One of the most enduring tales is the story of how the Anunnaki created humanity. According to ancient texts, there was a time when lesser gods, known as the Igigi, were burdened by hard labor. The Anunnaki, seeking to relieve their fellow deities, decided to fashion humans from clay mixed with the blood of a god. Thus, humankind was born to serve the gods, tend their temples, and offer them food and praise. Yet, the relationship between gods and humans was never static. The Anunnaki could be generous, granting blessings and wisdom, but they could also be wrathful, sending plagues or disasters when they were displeased. The myths are filled with stories of negotiation, bargaining, and even rebellion, a reflection of the complex relationship the Sumerians had with the forces that shaped their world. The Epic of Gilgamesh offers a vivid window into the world of the gods. Gilgamesh himself was two-thirds divine, a son of the goddess Ninsun and the mortal king Lugalbanda. His adventures brought him face to face with gods, monsters, and the ultimate mystery of death and immortality. In his quest, he sought out Utnapishtim, the survivor of a great flood sent by the gods, a story that would later inspire legends across the ancient world. The Sumerian pantheon was not static. Over centuries, new gods were introduced, old ones merged or faded away, and myths were adapted as political and cultural changes swept through Mesopotamia. The Anunnaki, however, continued to hold a special place. In some texts, they're described as judges in the underworld, weighing the souls of the dead. In others, they're the architects of civilization, teaching humans to write, farm, and build. Rituals dedicated to the Anunnaki were elaborate and highly organized. Priests and priestesses played central roles, performing daily offerings of bread, beer, incense, and livestock. Major festivals could last days, involving music, dance, and processions through the city streets. The king often participated, reinforcing his divine mandate to rule by demonstrating piety and respect before the gods. The symbolism found in Sumerian art and artifacts often depicts the Anunnaki with distinctive features: horn crowns, flowing robes, and sometimes wings or objects suggesting their power. Cylinder seals, used to mark documents and property, frequently show scenes of gods in council, humans presenting offerings, or mythical creatures standing guard. The Sumerians also left us with hymns, prayers, and poetic texts addressed to the Anunnaki. These works reveal a deep sense of awe and reverence, as well as a desire to understand and influence the will of the gods. Some hymns praise the creative power of Enki, the justice of Enlil, or the ferocity of Inanna in battle. Others plead for mercy, protection, or forgiveness, reflecting the uncertainties of life in the ancient world. The Anunnaki's connection to the heavens was central to Sumerian cosmology. The stars, planets, and constellations were believed to be the abodes or symbols of the gods. Astronomers, who were also priests, carefully tracked celestial movements, interpreting them as messages from the divine. These observations were not only religious, but also practical, helping to predict the seasons, floods, and the best times for planting and harvest. It is fascinating to consider how the legends of the Anunnaki spread and evolved. As neighboring cultures rose to power, they adopted and adapted Sumerian myths. The Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians each placed their own gods into the stories, but the Anunnaki remained as a council of powerful beings, present at the creation of the world and the judgment of souls. The question of the Anunnaki's true nature has intrigued scholars and the public alike. Were they simply gods, or do the ancient texts hint at something more mysterious? Some cuneiform tablets describe the gods descending from the skies or traveling in chariots of fire. Are these metaphors for natural phenomena, or could they be distant memories of extraordinary events lost to time? The role of the Anunnaki in the underworld is another layer of their complex mythology. In many stories, they gather in the land of the dead to pass judgment on souls. The goddess Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld, is sometimes counted among the Anunnaki, ruling over the afterlife with a stern hand. The journey to the underworld, as told in the story of Inanna's descent, is a tale of sacrifice, transformation, and the eternal cycle of life and death. Sumerian temples were not only places of worship, but also centers of economic and political power. The temple staff managed vast tracts of land, organized laborers, and controlled the distribution of surplus crops. In exchange for their offerings, people sought the favor of the Anunnaki, hoping for good harvests, healthy children, and protection from disaster. The relationship between temple and city was symbiotic, with priests acting as mediators between the mortal and divine realms. One of the most intriguing aspects of Sumerian belief was the idea that the gods could walk among humans. In festival processions, statues of the gods were carried through the streets, and some rituals involved priests or kings acting as the living embodiment of a deity. This blending of the human and the divine gave life in Sumer a sense of wonder and danger. At any moment, the gods might intervene to bless or curse the people. The artistic legacy of the Anunnaki can be seen in the surviving artifacts of Sumer. Intricate carvings, alabaster statues, and the iconic horn crowns worn by the gods. These images not only decorated temples and palaces, but also served as powerful reminders of the ever-present influence of the divine in every aspect of life. The myths of the Anunnaki also serve as a way to explain the mysteries of nature and society. Storms, earthquakes, droughts, and victories in battle were all attributed to the will of the gods. When disaster struck, the people asked what offerings or rituals might restore favor. When fortune smiled, they celebrated with music, feasts, and gifts to the temples. Over time, the stories of the Anunnaki were woven into the larger fabric of Mesopotamian mythology. Later cultures would build on these tales, adding new gods and heroes, but always returning to the ancient council of the Anunnaki as the foundation of their worldviews. The Anunnaki became both creators and judges, distant yet ever-present, shaping the destiny of humanity. As we look back on the world of Sumer, we can see how the myths of the Anunnaki reflect universal questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? What forces shape our lives and our world? The Sumerians sought answers in the stories of their gods, in the rituals of their temples, and in the mysteries of the heavens. The fascination with the Anunnaki endures to this day. Scholars continue to translate ancient texts, uncover new artifacts, and debate the meaning of myths. Meanwhile, the public imagination is captured by the possibility of hidden truths, lost knowledge, and connections to the stars. The Anunnaki remain a symbol of humanity's enduring quest to understand the mysteries of existence. Beyond the principal Anunnaki gods, the Sumerian pantheon included a vast array of divine beings, each embodying different aspects of nature, society, and human experience. Among these were the Igigi, sometimes considered lesser gods or servants of the Anunnaki, often depicted as laborers burdened with the tasks of maintaining the cosmos. The tension between the Igigi and the Anunnaki is central to some myths, especially the story of humanity's creation, where humans were made to relieve the Igigi of their toil. This narrative highlights the complex hierarchy and interrelationships within the divine realm. Another significant figure in Sumerian mythology is Nergal, the god of war, plague, and the underworld. Unlike the more benevolent Enki or Inanna, Nergal's domain was darker, embodying the destructive forces that the Sumerians feared. His myths often portray him as a fierce warrior and ruler of the underworld, where he presided over the dead alongside Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld and sister of Inanna. The story of Inanna's descent into the underworld is one of the most evocative and symbolic myths of Sumer, illustrating themes of death, rebirth, and transformation. Inanna herself was one of the most complex and revered deities. Known also as Ishtar in later cultures, she was the goddess of love, war, fertility, and political power. Her dual nature made her a symbol of life's contradictions, passion and violence, creation and destruction. Myths about Inanna describe her daring descent into the underworld to confront her sister Ereshkigal, an act that cost her dearly, but ultimately led to her resurrection and return. This myth is often interpreted as an allegory for the cycles of nature, the changing seasons, and the human experience of loss and renewal. The Sumerians also believed that their kings were chosen by the gods, often considered divine or semi-divine themselves. The rulers served as intermediaries between the gods and the people, responsible for maintaining order, justice, and religious observance. The divine mandate was not a mere political tool, but a deeply spiritual concept that linked earthly authority to cosmic order. This connection is reflected in the elaborate coronation rituals, in which the king would symbolically marry the goddess Inanna or receive blessings from the high priesthood. Religious festivals in Sumer were grand affairs, often lasting several days and involving the entire community. The Akitu festival, celebrated during the new year, was one of the most important. It was a time for renewal, when the king would reaffirm his divine right to rule, and the gods were honored with offerings and ceremonies designed to ensure fertility, prosperity, and protection. The rituals often involved sacred dramas reenacting mythic battles or divine marriages, performed by priests and sometimes the king himself. Music, dance, food, and communal feasting were integral parts of these celebrations, fostering social cohesion and spiritual renewal. The symbolism found throughout Sumerian art and architecture reveals much about their religious beliefs. The ziggurat, for example, was not just a temple, but a cosmic mountain, linking earth to heaven. Its step design may have represented the layers of the universe or the ascent of the soul. Reliefs and statues frequently depict gods wearing horned crowns, a symbol of divinity, and holding ritual objects like the rod and ring, which signified authority and justice. Sumerian literature, beyond the epic tales, includes numerous hymns, prayers, and wisdom texts that reflect the values and worldview of the people. These writings often emphasize the importance of balance between humans and gods, order and chaos, life and death. The wisdom literature advises kings and commoners alike on how to live in harmony with the divine will and the natural world. The Anunnaki's influence extended beyond religion into law and governance. The famous Code of Uarnamu, one of the earliest known legal codes, invokes the gods as the source of justice and order. Laws regulated social behavior, property rights, and punishments, reflecting the belief that earthly justice was a reflection of divine justice. The king, as the chief enforcer of these laws, was tasked with maintaining the equilibrium set by the gods. The astronomical knowledge of the Sumerians also had religious significance. They believed that the gods manifested in the stars and planets, and that celestial events were messages or omens. Priests closely observed eclipses, planetary conjunctions, and the phases of the moon, interpreting these phenomena to guide decisions on agriculture, warfare, and religious rituals. This blending of science and spirituality was a hallmark of Mesopotamian thought and demonstrates the sophistication of Sumerian civilization. Despite the reverence for the gods, the Sumerians also understood the precariousness of life and the limits of divine favor. Many myths convey a sense of inevitability about death and suffering. The afterlife was viewed as a shadowy existence in the underworld, a place where the dead lived as shades without joy or light. This somber view contrasts with the grandeur of life on earth and the power of the gods, underscoring the human condition's fragility. The relationship between the Anunnaki and humans was complex and sometimes ambiguous. While the gods were creators and protectors, they could also be distant or indifferent. The myths often depict humans striving to please the gods through rituals and offerings, yet unable to fully comprehend their will. This tension between dependence and mystery is a recurring theme in Sumerian religion. In addition to the Anunnaki, the Sumerians recognized countless minor gods, spirits, and demons. Protective spirits guarded homes and fields, while malevolent entities could cause harm or illness. Magical incantations and amulets were common tools to ward off evil and secure blessings. This rich spiritual landscape reflects a worldview in which the divine permeated every aspect of existence. The enduring fascination with the Anunnaki in modern times can be partly attributed to the enigmatic nature of the Sumerian texts. Translators and scholars have uncovered stories that blend history, myth, and allegory, leaving room for interpretation and speculation. The descriptions of gods descending from the heavens or traveling in fiery chariots have inspired theories ranging from metaphorical to extraterrestrial. While mainstream scholarship emphasizes the cultural and religious context of these myths, the allure of hidden knowledge and ancient wisdom continues to captivate popular imagination. The Anunnaki have become symbols of the unknown, bridging the gap between ancient history and contemporary mystery. As we reflect on the deep and multifaceted world of the Anunnaki and the Sumerian gods, it is clear that their stories are more than just ancient myths. They represent humanity's earliest efforts to understand the cosmos, the forces of nature, and the place of mortals within the grand scheme of existence. In the next episode, we will explore the fascinating modern theories inspired by the Anunnaki legends, examining the claims, evidence, and controversies that surround these ancient gods. We will also trace how the myths of Sumer influenced later civilizations and cultures, shaping the myths of Babylon, Assyria, and beyond. Thank you for joining us on this immersive journey into the divine world of Sumer. Stay curious and prepare for the next chapter of our exploration into the mysteries of the ancient world.